graciously is our journeys. And our first journey is going to be presented by Michele Maurice. And I will turn it over now to Michele.
Thank you. I'm going to just share my content here. I'm not sure I remember how to do this. Get there right there. Okay, ladies, sorry for that for a minute. Michele Maurice, many of you have met me before, and many of you have seen this quilt at the Merrimack Valley show last fall. It was displayed in the red and white section. And in my mind, there are two kinds of quilts that I make. I make either a serious quilt, something that you really have to pay attention to your fabric choices, your patterns, you plan it, and you strive for perfection. And then the other kind of quilt I like to make is what I call a fun quilt. And a fun quilt is something that's less structured. They can have novelty fabrics, usually very cheery or little subtle elements, or something that just gives you a chuckle. And since this is my member journey, I want you to know that at some point in time, I would like to be remembered for my fun quilts. This is one of my first quilts. This is actually my first quilt when I started quilting in 2009. It's a story quilt. The pattern came from the book of A Quilter's Diary in Stitches by Mimi Dietrich. The blocks represent family, love, and home. And those are the three things that are important to me. It's something that perfection really doesn't exist in this quilt, but I do leave it hanging in my home, and I look at it frequently. It's behind me now. And it reminds me as a quilter how far I've come in my quilting. After I completed that quilt, I decided it was time to learn more about applique. I love applique. It's my passion, and I love applique quilts. So I set out with a series of 3 patterns by Joined at the Hip. Some of you may recognize them. And I practiced with fusible applique, with needle turn applique, and with a raw edge applique that was hand stitched. They are normally on my front door. They're a little kind of lighthearted and fun. But as a new quilter, I started reading everything I could find about quilting. And I stumbled across a quilter that I adore, Freddie Moran. She's known for her brights and for her tagline that red is a neutral. Well, one of the things that she did was little boys and little girls. And I thought, wow, those are so fun. She didn't have a pattern for them in her book, but she showed you how you could make them your own and make your own pattern. So I did that. I collected fabrics that one would find in a garden, and I call them scarecrows. After I had a number of them together, I set them into a quilt. And that's my quilt. And I have named that quilt Ernest and Phoebe after my grandparents who emigrated here from Canada. They were quilters in Canada. I'm sorry, they were gardeners in Canada and farmers. And I just thought it would be a nice tribute to them. In 2008, 2009, there was a campaign on television about cows. Where were the happiest cows? We got to vote on happy cows, what state happy cows were in. They had a nice little jingle. I'd go around the house, I'd be singing that jingle as I was making my scarecrow quilt. So of course I had to make a cow quilt. This is my cow quilt. The pattern is from Debbie Mum. It's in one of her books. And California won as the state with the happiest cows in it. So this quilt is titled California Cows Are Happy Cows. Often it's hanging inside my front door, and it's the first thing I see when I come downstairs in the morning, and it's the first thing I see when I come home. I just get a chuckle out of that quilt. It's another quilt that's farming theme. And this was from Eleanor Burns's book, Quilts on America's Barns. The book is kind of fun. It teaches you a little bit about barn quilts, where they are, where the American barn trail is, but also she gives you the blocks and the patterns. You design your own quilts with it. And that was fine. I got the 8 really serious blocks done, and I decided that I needed to make my quilt different than Eleanor's quilt. So I added some applique, some animals, some little flowers. I have a cow silo. I really had a lot of fun with that. And this is another one from Freddie Moran. It was in her book, Collaborative Quilting. The houses in this quilt, the images inside the houses, I don't know if you can see them on your screens, but inside the windows and inside the doors, I have things like pies. There's a martial artist, there's bicycles, there's pizza, there's Monopoly figures, there's money, there's more cows. They represent all of the things that were important to my family at the time. And it was a lot of fun to make that quilt, a lot of collecting. This was a Home Sweet Home quilt along that Kim Lapasek published. It was a free block of the month program. Kim Lapasek is the same quilter that designed the Dresden neighborhood, which we have a class for in the spring. So if you haven't signed up for it, she's a lot of fun. Her Dresden neighborhood is great. But this was far prior to this. This was around 2009 she came out with this, and it's still available on her website. She encouraged us to use fabrics that were lighthearted, could help support the theme of the blocks. So in the pond, I've got little sailboats. You'll see little piggies in here. There's a close-up of a little set of a section. I've got rose trees, an owl that's baking cupcakes, raccoons frolicking in the yard. And then I moved on to a serious quilt. This was a quilt that was published by Bunny Hill Designs. It's called Snowbound. I was lucky enough to join a back basting applique group, and I learned back basting while I made this quilt. We met monthly. It took me about 6 months to make the blocks. There's a close-up of the quilt. So the blocks include a little bit of embroidery, a little bit of applique. It's really not a lot of applique in this quilt, some embellishments. It's really a cute quilt. This is a pattern by Pat Sloan. It's called Mama's Garden. Pat Sloan did a workshop in Beverly with the Quilters, Beverly Quilts Guild. She was a lot of fun. She had a nice trunk show. She showed us some very light-hearted quilts, all applique, a little bit of piecing, but mostly applique. And her workshop focused on how to put the background together and applique on top of it. It was all about a pieced background. So I decided that I wanted to really get as much out of the class as I could. I chose to do my background in darker colors, and my whole lesson was about choosing the correct values to put on top of the background so I could see them. But it's another fun, lighthearted quilt. There's some little bees in there. There's some little chickens in there. It's just a little cute quilt. I like Pat Sloan so much that I did her block of the month that summer. She had a block of the month, a mystery quilt. Block of the month, it was just for the summer, and it was called Vacation Time. I chose the background fabric first around the outer edge, and then I pulled all the fabrics for the blocks. And when I completed the quilt top, I had no idea what it was going to look like. I completed the quilt top and it was like, oh my, this is a little bit brighter than what I had expected. Did you ever do that? So I decided I have nothing to lose. I'm going to practice free motion quilting on it. So I did. And I started with white thread on the white background, and I could not see what I was doing. So once again, I said, I've got nothing to lose here. And I worked with the orange thread on the white background. And I really like the results. It's now one of my favorite quilts. And I don't know if you can tell by this picture, but this quilt has been washed a lot and loved a lot. Some of you may recognize this quilt. This is Over the River by Crabapple Hill. That hangs in my living room almost 6 months of the year. It's one of the favorites here. This is a close-up of it. This quilt is all embroidered with a back stitch. It's done in a sulky 12-weight thread. And the flying geese that go around the edges, some of them have little reindeers in them because I had to add a little bit of lightheartedness to that quilt. This quilt is from the Frightfully Crazy Buggy Barn book, and it's called If the Hat Fits. And it's the little witches on broomsticks, and her little legs are all dangling. They're adorable. So while many of my friends were working on the Stack and Whack One Block Wonder Quilts, I decided that I was going to do a slice and dice and shuffle quilt. And this was so much fun. I have another one planned. I love the modern quilt movement. What I enjoy the most is the unconventional use of traditional elements. And this quilt, I think, is a pretty good example of that. The pattern is called Sisters 10, and it's by Anne-Marie Cheney. And each block, it's called Sisters 10 because there are 10 blocks in each corner. But each block has a sister block, and the sister block is in the opposite corner. So there are only 10 blocks in this quilt. You just make them twice. Love the setting. The quilt was really fun. She still has that pattern on her website. Does everybody else have audio?
I have audio.
Okay. I just got a message that someone lost audio.
Yeah, I have audio too.
Okay, thank you. This is a quilt that I don't know if you are familiar with Victoria Finlay Wolf, and she did this book called 15 Minutes of Play. I had an opportunity to take a class with Victoria and learn the technique of her 15 minutes of play. And it's all about making fabric from your fabric scrap from your fabric scraps. Excuse me. This quilt is nothing new about making your own fabric from scraps. That is something that's old and it's been going on for a long time. But the way that Victoria has done it and put it into big blocks and changed the settings on it, it's really kind of fun and special. Her motto is, don't worry about cutting up your fabric. She says, cut it up. You've got more. You know you've got more. There's a close-up of one of the blocks. It's a fun technique to just sit there and cut your fabric into pieces and then just sew it together. It's so relaxing, and that's where the 15 minutes comes from. So at the end of your sewing day, just pick up some fabrics off the floor or wherever they are, sew them together, and before you know it, you'll have sheets of brand new fabric and you can cut it up and make a whole quilt. I have a ghastly fabric collection. Or I should say I used to have a ghastly fabric collection. I love the ghastlies. But you collect the fabric and then you don't know what you're going to do with it sometimes. And one day I just happened upon a Tula Pink book from the Quilts from the House of Tula Pink. And she had some of her fabric in frames on the wall on her quilt. And it was just an moment. This is exactly what I'm going to do with my ghastly fabric. So I fussy cut the fabric, set them in frames, had some wood grain frames to make, fabric to use as the frames. I used little velvet ribbons to hang my portraits from on the wall, and did little covered buttons, all with ghastly fabric, set it on a solid background, and had the background quilted to resemble moire wallpaper. I think it came out kind of cute. A few years ago, June Pease taught a class of Backyard Birds by Becky Goldsmith at Portsmouth Fabric. I took that class and learned about making backgrounds and creating contrast a little bit differently than the class that I had taken with Pat Sloan. This one was a more subtle background. June helped us select some of the fabrics. As you see, we had fun playing with it. I've got little trees in my backgrounds. I've got birds in my backgrounds. And then she taught us different methods of applique to applique the birds on. And before we finished, she made sure that she told us that we didn't have to do everything that was in the pattern. We could change anything in the quilt we wanted. Well, I decided that I was going to create my own border for this quilt. I wanted something that was lighthearted, and I wanted something that resembles the flowers in the middle. And I think it set the birds off nicely. So with all this quilting, you accumulate some scraps. And I had accumulated a number of scraps. And I used them in my Gypsy Wife quilt. And that's a Jen Kingwell pattern. And you'll see I used probably the remaining of my novelty fabrics in that quilt. I have the last of the little sheep in there. I have some bicycles. I have a little chicken. In case you have me on your screen, I'll move that for a second. I have the little chicken. It was a great quilt to do. It's if you have the pattern and you're not, you're hesitant to make it, it goes together very, very quickly. Once you get started, you'll see how quickly it goes, and it's another fun pattern. This is something that's been floating around Pinterest or the internet for a little while. It's a pixelated heart, and I just had to do a pixelated heart. I used some of my red cave scraps. I used a lot of the low volume scraps from some of my modern quilts. And the pixelated heart is on one side, and on the reverse side, I used the love pattern from Tulip Pink. And I centered that and built a log cabin around the outside and added some little hearts. It's a Valentine quilt. That's another quilt in my house that has been, since that picture was taken, washed at least a half a dozen times. We use our quilts. So some of you might be wondering what I'm working on now. On the left is what's on my design wall. It's chickens, baskets, little flowers. On the right is what the pattern is. The pattern came from Quilt Mania. It was published some time ago, but I'm doing it now. And it might be a little reminiscent, well, where my journey started in the presentation. This was the entire quilt that hung in the Merrimack Valley Quilt Show. It's titled Lucille. The original pattern's name is Lucille Ball. It's Liz Swan quilted the lovely chickens and the sunflowers for me. So thank you, everyone. That's the end of my journey.
So I have a question for you, Michele.
Yes.
How long have you been quilting?
2009.
And
Any
do
other
you do your own quilting? I know you said Liz quilted this one, but what about the others?
I'll go back to this one for a second. This is the, this one is done in big stitch hand quilted. And I did that as in a quilt as you go style. And when you put it together in 7 sections. So that really made it easier to hand stitch it. And this one here, I did that free motion machine quilting. I did that myself. I also did, thank you, Carrie. I also did, oh, this one here. I did that one on my own. And then I showed you the orange one I did to practice that there. So I'm still learning to free motion quilt. I guess. On the serious quilts, I think I'd rather someone else did them. On the fun quilts, I don't mind.
They all look wonderful. Does anyone else have a question for Michele? No? Thank you, Michele. That was really fun. I love your quilts, and I'm sure everyone else does. And thank you for doing your journey.
Thank you. So how do I get this off the screen?
There
There we
we
go.
go. There we go. Jamie, are you all set for your journey?
I am.
Awesome.
I am.
Look forward to it.
Okay, let me get started here. Share my screen. All right, so can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
So I thought so my journey started, this is a photo of, oh gosh, I think this is me in the lower corner, and my mom to the right. Of course, I don't know if the orientation, my grandmother in the middle, and my aunt. These are the ladies that inspired me and mentored me in my journey. I started with clothing, learning to sew clothing, and I started really young. Every outfit well, maybe not the mink stole that my grandmother was wearing, but every outfit here is sewn. We would get an outfit every Easter. The only person in this photo is my little sister. She never got the sewing bug, but that's okay. She's got some other talented, but these ladies, they were just so talented, so very talented. And they taught me everything, anything I wanted, they would help me with. And I just love this period. So that's the sewing machine my mom taught me on. That's a Singer 401A. That was, she was pregnant with me in 1959, Christmas 1959. My dad gave that to her for Christmas gifts. And I learned to sew on it. I actually ended up buying one last year, that exact same model. Not only because it sews well, but it's just, I wanted to have that memory of my mom. But I mean, it was just a classy time. So I don't have any examples of what I sewed, but I could tell you I started with my Barbie dolls. My cousin was reminding me that my mom taught us how to sew shorts, pull-on shorts. I went to Catholic grammar school, so there wasn't a lot of opportunity to make clothing, except in the later years, like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Once a month, we could wear we could wear something that wasn't the uniform, and I would make my outfits for those special times. So I did make tennis outfits. I made all my gowns, and I'm pretty sure these are the patterns some of the patterns I used. Of course, I didn't save, but no, you know, you can buy those. They're on antique sites and so forth. So I continued sewing probably through high school, and then stopped in college. We lived in jeans. There was it was easier to buy the clothes and make the clothes. But I did make my first quilts. Most of my quilts I've given away, so I don't have as many pictures of the things I've made, but this was given to my sister. And she still has it. And it's a card trick game, and it's a wall hanging. It was tied.
Excuse me, Jamie,
Yeah.
we can't see any other picture except that first one.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay, so what's going on here? New share.
There we go.
Now I can't move can you see
all
that?
right, so, yeah, so
No.
that's the sewing machine.
Yeah. This is where I started, some examples of things.
Beth,
We
we can see
didn't-
the
yeah.
patterns.
Okay.
So now whatever you're doing seems to be working.
Oops. How's that? Can you see the card trick?
Yep, we can see it.
All right. Sorry about that. You're probably chatting and I don't see the chats up there. I was ignoring them. Sorry, ladies. So this was my first quilt, and it was a wall hanging. It was about 1988. I was in my first job. Quilting was, I got a book, and like I said, we still have that in the family. So it was quite a while until I got the motivation to try a quilt. And I discovered Eleanor Burns and said, quilt in a day. Well, I say that's quilts in a month plus. Of course, I said, I'm going to make a queen size quilt. So my very first quilt for usage on the bed was a queen size quilt. It took me about a month to construct, and it is primarily hand tied. I lived in a tiny little ranch house. I didn't have the floor space, so I went up to my parents' home. They were in Florida. It was wintertime. And I was watching their house, and I moved some of their furniture and layered my, sandwiched my quilts together and promptly tied it to the rug. So, yeah, lots of lessons learned, but we still, my husband and I still use this quilt. We have it in the, in the family room. It's seen its wear and tear, but it brings back some good memories. I've never made a queen size quilt since. That was it. Lots of lessons learned because I taught myself. I read books. I went to as many classes as I could while working full time. This was a quilt with flannel, and we still have it. But what did I learn? It's buying quality fabric and pre-washing, because all those reds in that quilt ran. But again, it's just it's got a lot of memories for me. I did quilt it myself. I pretty much do all the quilting. This was free motion quilting, yeah, it's a little throw. It's in the living room too. So then I jumped to, this is around, now I'm actually making labels on my quilt, so I actually know what's going on when I made it. So Bargello Christmas design. This was, I think the engineer in me loves construction, loves putting things together. This is also free motion quilting, and you can't see it, but it's all I made in the borders. I use cookie cutters, gingerbread and candy canes, and I use those as my my pattern stencils. And then I made just the inside is just quilted with big Christmas tree bulbs. Oops. So I threw this because long before the internet, I would watch Alex Anderson's television show, and I would make notes. And I still have that notebook. And I would watch her guests, and then I would try and find her guests' information. And these shows were not on at normal hours. I would have to sometimes get up at 5 in the morning on a Saturday to see her show, the half-hour show. And that's how I learned. And I still follow Alex. She still looks great. So I don't have a lot of my quilts to show you that from that period of time, 1999, because I give my quilts as gifts, and I never thought to take a picture of it. I just wasn't. So around in 2005, I decided to go on a cruise. I had just gotten divorced. I always wanted to cruise, but I didn't have anyone to cruise with. And an email came into my inbox from a tour company that combined quilting and cruising. So I went my very first cruise to celebrate my singlehood, was with quilting. And they provided the sewing machine. I just had to show up. And I met the most wonderful people. In fact, I met a woman that I traveled with for the next 10 years. She lived in California. I lived in Massachusetts. And once a year we would meet somewhere and combine travel with quilting. She was like a big sister I never had. But yeah, so we had, I think on that trip, we had 3 instructors. Carol Doak was one of them. I had taken a class, Carol, locally here in Salem, New Hampshire. And it was just a coincidence we were on the same trip. So my quilting journey continued. I'm sorry, no pictures. I didn't think of it, but 2006, life got interrupted. I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I needed chemo and radiation. And I thought, and I continued to work, and I thought, oh, this would be a great time to catch up on all my quilting. Ladies, my head could not handle it. I couldn't follow the directions. I will still some UFOs from that period. But what I did is I just kept learning, watching, and waiting for my head to clear up. Came up with all sorts of things that I wanted to and still want to do it. So I am doing well. Got through that period. So I went on another cruise, quilting cruise. And this isn't actually from the quilting cruise, but I had met one of the instructors, Rita Fischel. She had, she's since retired, but she also did a mystery quilt. But one of the things that I've benefited from it is meeting people and keeping and networking and becoming friends. I sent my first quilt out. This is the first quilt that I sent out to be quilted. It was a gift to my mom. Since my mom has passed, the quilt came back to me, to our house, and my husband has this hanging up in his hobby room. And yeah, so quilting and cruising. I do have a couple pictures of gifts that I've given out. Again, you can see that my preference for construction of especially right angles, and I think on the we have the plus sign. This one hangs in my brother's apartment in New York. I explained to him, you can use it. It's a quilt. You can use it. No, they hung it up. So when I go to visit, I can see this. Another gift that this went to a friend on the right-hand side here for her 50th birthday. I think at this time it starts dawning on me, I should probably take pictures so I can start sharing what I've created. So then I think, Bonnie, you can see that I love to learn. I have a passion for learning. So instead of going on a cruise, my girlfriend Judy and I, we went to Costa Rica. It was called a cocoon. And we didn't bring any sewing machines with us. It was all handwork. One day we spent, this was just so relaxing, embellishing with needlework. We did Shashiko with Pepper Corey. She was our instructor on that. I learned some applique. And then Jenny Byers was another instructor, and that's hand piece tumbling block. Ladies, that's as much as I got done. I still have all the diamonds cut up, but I have yet to get back on it. Just a wonderful, no matter where I go with quilting, I meet such wonderful people, both men and women. And yeah, so let's see. Again, I jumped on a cruise, went quilting. This is an actual output from the quilting cruise. It was one instructor, his name is Mark Sherman. And he does a lot of his own hand-dyed fabrics, but this is actually, each one of those is actually woven. Each one of these blocks is a woven, you weave it together and then secure it with an applique stitch. And then we have the borders around it. This was given to my best friend for her birthday, and this is the second quilt that I sent out to have professionally machine quilted. She only lives 3 doors down, so anytime I want to see it, I can go over and look at it. See what else I have here. Oh, so right before the pandemic, I went to Missouri Star Quilt. I spent I think it was 3 nights. It was a girl's, Jenny and her daughter's quilts. I forget the whole title, but it was dormitory style sleeping. Didn't know anybody, but once I got there, I again met some wonderful people. These are UFOs. Even one I still haven't corrected. I've got to get that little block turned around. I'll tell you that family, the Jenny Doan's family, and what she's done for their community is an amazing story. If you're not familiar with it, she actually published a book late last year. She kept that community, and I mean, she is the major employer for that town. It's just something that I wanted to do, and then the pandemic hit.
Question, Jamie.
Yeah.
On the last slide, what the pinwheels, was that folded?
Yes. How do I get back up there? Oops.
Oop. Yeah.
This here, yes, that
Yeah,
is
yeah.
folded. They kind of got squashed, but yes, that is that will be a table runner.
That's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah. That was my warm up. I didn't bring anything with me. I'd never been on a retreat, so I didn't know. And everybody brought something to work on. Some of these ladies worked day and night. And so I just grabbed a, small packet of fabric and a pattern, and that was my warm up. So the pandemic hit, and I've been doing a lot of online Facebook groups, and I joined mystery quilts, and it was paper piecing. I had not done paper piecing before. I completed this. I also invested in a embroidery machine, and the blocks, the solid blocks are my first attempt at embroidering, doing the quilting with the embroidery machine. And I ended up raffling that off for St. Jude's Hospital. We did that via just friends through Facebook, and almost $1,000 went to St. Jude's. And I remembered to take a picture. I think some of you might recognize some of these projects. Again, we've got the, I forget who ran this one, but we have also the applique, my little bird. And in the upper left-hand corner, again, this was an online class with Mark Sherman, and it was trapunto, but his method of trapunto, whether it's easier or not, I can't tell you for sure, but it also includes hand painting with gold leaf or gold paint. So actually that hangs right over my desk here in my office. And the other thing I've been doing is creating and making handbags. Right now I'm learning construction, but what I want to do is create handbags with quilting and embroidery and putting them all together. But before you do that, in my method, I have to learn how to construct, go back to that sewing of clothing techniques. So these are some of the things I've done. And again, these have actually gone out. I've done swaps where I make something for someone else somewhere in the world. Some of these have gone to Australia, Texas, Canada. Most recently, I attended online a combination history lesson and quilt lesson, piecing. And it was with Quilt Folk. I'm not sure how many of you have seen these opportunities, but it was a 2-day, 3 hours a day session. It was actually held or transmitted from UK, but we were from all over the world. So we learned more about the Bronte sisters and the books that they created, but they were also quilters. And so the block that we created is based off of a quilt that's in the house that is now a museum. And wow, that was just a wonderful way to learn history. And they offered a couple of these a year. There's a combination of history and quilting. And yes, Mary Fawns she was doing the history lesson. Boy, she's so cute. She was so much fun. And then what am I working on now? Well, my goal is to bring a whole bunch of creative things together. I would like to this is some of my artwork. I would like to create fabric from my artwork and apply it into not just my quilts, but the handbag. So I don't know where this is going to take me, but first I'm going to learn how to reproduce the artwork into a fabric. And of course, spoon flower is one of the options where you can have almost anything printed on any fabric. Then continue my my quilting, my color theory, my bag construction. We'll see. Like I said, my passion is just learning new things. So that's all I have.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting. You have so many different ideas and combinations. They're very fascinating. Does anybody have any questions? No? Can everybody see Marilyn's chat? She said, wow, what a journey. I have to second that. Thank you very much, Jamie. It's been very
welcome.
fun. And
it was fun for me too. I mean, I had more fun I went down the rabbit hole with the patterns, trying to find something that reminded me of my, that grammar school time. But yeah, it was fun. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Michele, as well. It's always fun to see what's happening with our friends and fellow quilters and how they've come along in their journey. And I would encourage all of you, whether you present or whether you don't, to think about your journeys and put your own journey together, because as I watch this, I realize that there are so many components to what we do and we don't keep track of any of it. Even just for your own satisfaction, it would be a fun thing to put your own journey together and perhaps share at some point. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. If anyone has any questions about any of what's been brought up tonight, don't hesitate to call me or shoot me an email, and I will respond as soon as I can. Feedback is always nice too, positive or not. But I do appreciate everyone coming, and I will let you know as soon as I can whether we're going to be in person or whether we're going to be remote next month. It isn't looking really positive for next month yet, but we still have a few weeks before we have to make a final decision. And that being said, if nobody has any questions or anything, I will adjourn the meeting. Nothing? Okay. And the meeting is adjourned at 8:23. And I will see you all at the board meeting. I believe it's February 2nd. It's the first Wednesday of February. And anyone who is not on the board who would like to attend, just let me know. And I'll send you the Zoom link because we do the board meetings Zoom. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening. Stay well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.